Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Jarrell Mason, aka Jay Mason. Welcome to an episode of Beyond the Album Cover, another one, where we get inside the entertainment industry with those in the know and give them their flowers while they're here to be celebrated. With me
Do you know
right now,
what? Hold on 1 second. Right, because I cannot see my face.
I have a man from originally across the pond, now makes his home in Antigua. We're going to talk about the histories of UK radio, underground, Kiss FM, the music scene in the UK. Radio changes over the decades, and then some with my man Dave VJ. Dave, thank you very much for coming on Beyond the Album Cover, and how are you?
Thank you very much for inviting me, Jarrell. Yes, I am good. I've literally just walked in. I don't actually live here. Unfortunate circumstances due to my parents passing away kind of landed me here. But we will talk all about that. So I don't want to jump the situation because I know how it works when you've got your questions. So we can get into all that. But once again, thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, no, it's not a problem. I definitely appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast and chop it up with me. So let's just go ahead and let's just start it off. Where you were born and where did your love of music come from?
Okay, so I was born in London in an area where carnival takes place. So, like you have boroughs, we have boroughs as well in the UK. So, I was born in the borough of Kensington and Chelsea. Eventually, I moved away from there and lived most of my life in the borough of Brent. Brent is probably more akin to what I it would eventually come to know as, say, like places like the Frack City, places like that. Um, out in Bronx and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I come from London. My parents are from Antigua. They're both from here. Music, I don't really know where the love came from because my dad, he didn't have a big record collection. By the time I was probably in my early 20s, I had probably 10 times the records that my dad had in his whole lifetime, you know?
Mhm.
And I didn't realize I was that fanatical about music until, of course, later on I started looking back at my life. That came from, as I've said many a time when people ask me, what I can tell you when I realized that I had a problem with music was when I was spending every single penny that was spare on it. And then getting past that, a lot of my friends who are um, DJs, stroke broadcasters, we all have the same thing. We were obsessed with finding out who the bass player was, who the drummer was, who the guitar player was, who was the producer, especially the producer, because they were the ones who shaped the sound that we were listening to. So that was definitely part of it. So just listening to, let's say, Marcus Miller, and I can tell you Marcus Miller's playing on Stanley Clarke or whatever, just from hearing without even seeing who it is. And that led to those things of just picking up an album cover and going, okay, this person's playing on it, it might be good. Because if I go back in between, before I got here, but after my love of initial music, there was the Def Jam days. And I remember going into the shop and just buying records because it was on Def Jam, whether it was good or not, just because that brand said it had to be something I like, which wasn't true. It wasn't true at all.
Mhm. Now, with the records, did you and your friends pool records where if you wanted a certain record but you didn't have it, you would borrow it or get together at somebody's house and have a listening session around the record player?
Definitely not. Never. I bought everything, which is why I was so broke. I bought everything. This is why I don't like Spotify. I'm not paying to rent my records. It's just never going to happen. I don't pay to rent music. I either want the record um, or I don't have it. So I go buy it. In those days, I would go and buy it. And because I pretty much bought everything, I never really missed out on anything. I bought what I wanted. And by that, I mean, there was genres and there's subgenres. And the subgenres, there's some I just didn't go for. Like, I wasn't into Japanese jazz. At the time, it was called Jap Jazz. The odd one or two I'd like, you know. But the majority of my music, when I really came into my own, I was into soulful disco.
Mhm.
So I like disco. I like soulful music. I discovered Mahalia Jackson, Aretha Franklin, Percy Sledge, a little bit of reggae, a little bit of calypso from my dad. But I just took it to the next level. Even when I remember my dad buying an album by Houston Pearson, which is a jazz album. And then when I went out to Crackers, George Powers was actually playing one of the tracks. I didn't know that my dad owned that record. He just bought records here and there, and I happened to play one of the tracks. I can't even remember what it was called, but when I played the track, I was like, "Oh my God, I've heard that record at Crackers. Oh, my dad's cool."
Now, the record hunting scene in the UK, was it about the same at the time as it was in the US, where you pretty much went to your mom and pop shops or your little off the wall record stores to get that exclusive record that nobody else had? Or did you go visit your chain stores that was equivalent to whatever the record store chain was in the US?
Now, definitely the smaller shops. My record buying days was mainly in my hometown. I bought from a record shop called All Ears, which was owned by Andy Soiker and Jerry Pike. For those of you who are, real avid record sleeve readers, you'll know that Jerry Pike and Andy Soiker were two members of Atmosphere who did the big record Dancing in Outer Space. And I used to buy my records off of them every Friday and Saturday. Literally just pull up there, whatever they had, I would buy. But to be fair, at that point, the records weren't that much money. I mean, they seemed expensive because I didn't have the money, but I still bought them. They were a 12-inch would cost £2.79. So you're talking, in today's money, it might be about maybe, let's say 10 US for a 12-inch. But eventually, a US 12-inch became £10, which is a lot more now. And so, sorry, in fact, so £10, if you think, like even here in Antigua, in the really good days, it was £1, get you $4. Now it's £10 is $3 and something when it's good. So that's to show you the fluctuation. So all of the majority of my early record buying came from All Ears. But before that, I can tell you how I actually bought. I know what my first record was I bought. Like I know my first 7-inch, I know my first album. And the story of getting them, I don't want to jump ahead, so I can hold it there.
You go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Okay. So my first 7-inch record was a reggae record by Bruce, I think his name was Bruce Ruffin. It's called Mad About You. It was like a pop reggae record. And my first album was Jackson 5 Greatest Hits. And the reason why I got them is because I wanted to buy from a mom and pop shop called Vasco's, which was a few miles away. It was a black guy, Jamaican. He made the odd record. If you are an older of a certain generation, which my parents' age fit into that, he made a record called Growing Old, which was really big with them. At all the house parties, they always played it. He had a record shop, and I wanted to buy, I think Prince Jazzbo Penny Reel was one of the first reggae records I actually did buy, but I wanted to buy it from him because he had imports. So I was given some record tokens for Christmas. So I went to his shop and he just went, "Get out of here with that. I don't take that. It's either money or nothing." So I had to go to a local shop, which is just around the corner from where I lived. And they didn't do the import. So I took what I could get. So I took the Jackson 5 album, and I took the Bruce Ruffin single. And that was the start of what I was buying. At that point, that would have been early 70s. By the time I'd got rid of all of my record collection, I probably had about 40,000 records. So I started collecting when I was about 7 or 8.
Wow, man, that's crazy. And now this was during the times where the world was a lot bigger, pre-internet, pre-social media, and you didn't really know what was going on any parts of the world. Now, how did you guys hear about what was going on in the US music-wise, and how long did it take for a US import to make its way over to the UK during that time?
Well, when I first started, let me say this first. I knew nothing about American music. All I knew was pop music. So if it was American, fine, but I didn't know anything about a lot of records other than what came up on the chart. So our version of Casey Kasem was Top of the Pops, came on once a week. That was your chart top 40, right? And they would run down the 10 to 30. They would play snippets of the ones that were rising, and then you get into the 20, and then they'd play a full top 10. As I remember it, I could be wrong. But with that in mind, that was all I knew. And when I went to school, I got into reggae from my friends, because nearly all my friends were into reggae. And I'd liked a little bit of it, but I didn't know that much. Well, once I started going out, I think at the age of 13. So I knew about musically what was going on from the age of 11. So that's at that point for us, I don't know what it's called in the States, but at that point, at my age, it would have been called the first year. So first year is 11, second year is 12, third year is 13, and so on and so forth. So by the time I got to the third year, I was deep into reggae, very, very, very deep. You know, I was into Dennis Brown, Delroy Wilson. There was no Buju them days because he was a little bit older. I think he's like 10 years younger than me. There was Errol Dunkley, Marcia Griffiths, you know. But even before that, actually, I got into what is known in the Jamaican world as DJing, but DJing is an MC as opposed to a beat juggler or a mixer or a blender, right? And I was just fascinated when I used to go on a Friday night to a place called Metro, which was the street over from what back in the day was known as Frontline. Frontline was where you could buy anything if you had the money. Crazy story about that, but I can always come back to that if you remind me. Mm-hmm. So I used to go to Metro on a Friday once I'd left school. At that point, I think I was maybe 17. And I used to go there all of the time. And then it just got to the point where it was like, it's just a danger to your health to go there. And after one fight, I've had enough of this. And by that point, I was going to Crackers with my best friend at the time. And I didn't want to go to Crackers. He said to me, I'll come to this club, it's called Crackers. Wasn't interested because I was really, really into reggae. And he said, just come, you're not doing anything. And at that point, it was like, it cost £1, okay? £1 to get in. And you got fries and a sausage as well. Bought your own drink. So you could have a decent night out for £5 and still get home. So I was like, all right, I'll go. Didn't like it. I was like, I'm never going back to this again. But nothing else to do. I thought, you know what, I'm going to go. Because it started around 9, finished at 12, 1 o'clock, something like that. And what changed my mind about it was because coming from a reggae world, as much as I didn't want to see the violence, but those were the hard boys, you know. They were what in my days they were called sticksmen. So that was short for stick-up kids. So these stick-up kids went to reggae clubs. They didn't go to soul clubs, but they would go every now and again. You could tell by the way they dressed because it was Gabici, tops, Farrah slacks, Toscana, Italian shoes, and then the upper end of that would be lizard skin, crocodile shoes, so Crocs, Lizzie's, and so on and so forth. Anyway, what changed my mind about the whole soul scene was we're standing in the queue, and soul guy bumped into the reggae guy, and it started to go off, and the soul guy's like, I'm really sorry, I'll buy your drink back or whatever. And because the reggae boy thought, okay, I can take this guy because, you know, he's just a little punk or whatever. And the soul boy put a beating on him. And I was like, whoa, okay, my thought process for what this really is, because it's about the person. It's not about what you're into. You know, as Rakim says, it's not where you're from, it's where you're at. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, so that changed my mind. And then all of a sudden I viewed the music in a different way. And I started to go there religiously. I went there every single week. And the same way I could remember producers and record labels for reggae. And once again, I didn't even realize that I had this, I guess, gift or odd gift, whatever it is, because to other people it's nothing. Especially when you're talking to your girlfriend who doesn't care anything about Joe Gibbs or Greensleeves or Trojan, none of those records, they don't care. Anyway, I started going to Crackers, and then I realized when George Power is playing and he says something, I can remember it. It's just doesn't mean anything to anybody, but I can remember when he said something. And that remembering means that when I go to the shop, I can remember what it is I want to buy. So I kept on going and kept on going, and it just grew from there, and I was buying more and more records. Eventually, I joined, and I lied, because at those days there's no internet, so you can lie. I said I had a whole heap of O-levels and A-levels. I had none, and I got a job working for a distributor. That distributor was Lightning Records, who they sold, in those days, jukebox records. So you get the records, you buy a pack of 10, and you sell them to a jukebox person, or a person who distributes them to jukebox people. So I started off in the department. I didn't do that well to start with, but I loved it because I was around the records. So I was an order picker. So I started off as a dinker. So it's literally, you've got a machine that punched the holes in the 7 inches. That's a dinking machine. And you had to work it in a certain way so that the pressure didn't split the record. And eventually, I then started to pick the orders. And then I left. And I started to go out with a girl that lived, where did she live? Sort of North London, maybe 45 minutes away from me. And I got a job in the same area. So I left the Lightning Records and I went to work at Arawak Records. Arawak Records is the label that put out Janet Kay's Silly Games. So I was there from the inception, and I saw the different things that Patrick was doing, Patrick Can. Eventually, I decided it wasn't for me, because Patrick would owe people money, or people would owe Patrick money, and I'm working in the shop and not realizing what's really going on, because that's a gangster world. I just didn't realize it. And one day, through an argument or whatever, Patrick threw somebody through the window of the shop. I was like, okay, this is not my real life. So I'm out of here. So Patrick did speak to Lightning Records, where I came from, to work for him, put in a word with the manager, and they got me back in there. But that was a really odd one, because the guy whose job I was taking over, because he wasn't any good at it, he was standing about 20 feet from me, and we were discussing me taking the job, because he just didn't know anything about music, whereas I did. And I didn't have any qualifications, just a great memory and a love and a passion. So when they said, we need you to come and take over the 12-inch department, and what we say in England, I blagged it. I just went, yeah, sure I can. And I knew nothing. So I just took the system that I had in my bedroom at home with my 100 records, and I applied that to the thousands of records that I used to have to order and look after every single day. So I got a diary, wrote down the new releases in that every single day, or when we had them. I would tell the telesales girls, these are what the records are. I'd give them a little bit of a description. Sometimes I'd have to give them a record. They had a record player upstairs with them, and they would just play the record to the clients, because a lot of the clients were in Spain, Germany, France, and they'd come over and they'd buy records by the thousands, because we had stuff that was on release and they would have to pay for it to be imported from the States. So it was cheaper for them to buy it from us and then collect back their tax once they'd shifted it, their VAT once they shifted it off to their respective country. So I worked on that for quite a long time. Well, it seemed like a long time. And then I said to them, listen, I want to go part-time, because I had started working DJing with, and at this point, I didn't know how to DJ. I could play records, but I didn't know what I was doing. And I started working with Mastermind, and we were what you'd call ghetto fabulous. We were hometown heroes with no money, but we were loved by everybody, because the thing that we did was we had a sound system that played soul music like you were listening to a reggae system. We were first ever. I mean, there might have been people elsewhere out of London, but not around us. So there was reggae sounds who played soul music, but we were well, before I joined them, they were another sound. They were called Conqueror, and then they split up and went into their separate ways. The reason why I ended up joining Mastermind was because they had more than one gig on a Friday, and I had records. It wasn't because I could DJ, it's because I had a record collection. They also had a record collection, so we played in two places at once, and so we could get paid twice. But that was, I guess, the end part. The middle part of that, so I had the job. The middle part is Herbie, who ran Mastermind. I can't even remember how we met, but he wanted to buy a record, and I said, listen, I'll get you my staff discount. Come in here, and you can buy the records. Because a record, I could buy a 12-inch for £1 that costs £3 in a shop or whatever, or £2 something. So anyway, that's what I did. Then he said, we are doing these nights. Can you play? It's like, sure. So that's what we did. And sound system was too big for us to really make any money. You'd get Kentucky and chips or KFC for the night, and that was it. And then you get a lift home. That was the end of it. I ended up leaving them because of circumstances that just was beyond my control. I just said, I can do better without you. And I went on and did. They still work now. They still do what they do. But I ended up going to radio and still playing out. And I moved into the West End. So I ended up going to radio and playing in the equivalent of 42nd Street, for a long time. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned the sound systems, and I just want to let people know just the influence of reggae with rap and how a lot of the immigrants from Jamaica and surrounding islands were immigrating to the U.S. Kool Herc brought the traditions of Jamaica to the U.S. and this little thing called rap was born at Sedgwick and Cedar, and rap is the most popular genre of music in the world, but its roots started with reggae. And over in the UK, you mentioned how a lot of people from the islands migrated over to the UK, and with the strong influence of reggae and how important it still is to the UK music scene. So can you talk about just the importance and influence of reggae in the overall music history of UK?
It's a really, really big deal. Even to this day, nobody wants to admit it. Because here's the thing, lots of people want to emulate even the beat, the way they talk, the behavior of reggae artists, even the gun finger thing when you're saluting a song, not realizing that gun finger thing, in real life, you're in a dance, people let off shots in the air, okay, like real shots in the air. So it's not no fake thing. So when the people going, bo, 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 that's real. They don't know that. Or, when people start talking about this ride or die, they really don't know what they're talking about. They're saying that, but they don't know. A lot of people, there's so many Jamaican and hip hop terms that people use all the time in completely wrong context all the time. And if you spend all your time trying to correct people, you never get through your day. You know what I mean? So you just kind of leave that alone. But the sound system thing is a very, very big deal. So Kool Herc, as we all know, he started the whole break thing without knowing what he was going to start. So he would play a James Brown record. He knew where the break was, and he would get two records and go back and forth, but they would not join because he didn't know how to join them to make it seamless. Yeah, I didn't know how to do that either. I got to learn how to do that because, let me jump forward and you can always come, pull me back when you're ready. I had to go to my granny's funeral in the States, in New Jersey, in the 80s. My dad said to me and my brother, I'll pay for you. At that point, I was working. My brother was still at school. And my mum stayed behind and looked after my youngest brother. And at that point, it was like, do you know what? I love American music. Don't really know my nan that well because I haven't seen her for years, but I want to go, It wasn't even about supporting my dad because I didn't know that. I just wanted to go and buy records. So I go to my grand's funeral. We stay with my aunt, my dad's sister. And the thing about my aunt was she was deeply, deeply religious. Deeply religious. So I stayed in her room. And when I stayed in her room, she had the radio tuned to a religious station. Oh, I left out a part. Let me back up. So when I got off the plane, in the States, the first thing I did was put on my Walkman and try and find a station. The first thing I found was Kiss. And the first record I ever heard coming off the plane was Ramona Brooks' I Don't Want You Back. So as a few days go by, we bury my nan. So that's my granny, for anybody who don't understand that. We bury my granny, and then I get to kind of just walk around trying to find a record shop. And the two biggest records at the time were Atlantic Star, When Love Calls, when Sharon Bryant used to be the lead vocalist, and Chaka Khan, What Are You Gonna Do For Me? Which I come to find out is not actually a Chaka Khan original. It's actually an Average White Band record that she did a cover of. And both versions are good in their own way, because obviously Chaka is, who she is, and Hamish Stewart is who he is as a singer. Anyway, I get those records, and I am happy. But one day, I'm in my aunt's room, and as good as the gospel is, because believe me, I mean, it was good, right? But I needed to find Kiss. So I found Kiss. This was a Saturday night. And so at that point, I might have been 17, 18. I'm not sure how old I was. Whatever age I wasn't really going out anywhere. I didn't drive. I didn't drive in the UK at that point. I didn't know how to drive at all. So I'm listening to the radio, and I hear two records, which I come to find out later it's called juxtaposition. Juxtaposing, which is laying one record on top of the other. And Shep Pettibone was the person doing the mixes. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what he's doing, but that's what I want to do. And so I held the mix in my head, which was, the Quicks was one. I can't remember who the other record was. Oh, On a Journey, I sing the Funky Electric. So it was the Quicks, can't remember the name of the song, but it was two records. And even to this day, to find two records that do that are almost impossible, because somebody lined them up and they play back to back in key, and they go up and down in exactly the right place for 6 minutes or whatever it was. And I was like, oh my God. But quite clearly, he was either using tape or more than two turntables to get that done, because it went from those two records and seamlessly into another record. And I just thought, I want to do that. So I come back to the UK, and when I get back to the UK, us Mastermind were playing with a set of guys we used to do everything with called Soul Incorporated. Shout out to Victor and the crew. And we are playing at a beach and sportswear party. And I did that same mix, but only I didn't know how to hold a mix, and we were using Garrett turntables, so they didn't even change speed. So all I did was I put one of the records on. So I don't know which one I put on, but let's just say I put the Quicks on, right? And then the Funky Electric, On a Journey, I put that on. And then once the two records matched beat-wise, I just literally switched it over, and everybody was going crazy. I'm thinking, is it that good? Because none of us had ever seen that before. I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know mixing, I didn't know juxtaposing, none of that. I just knew it was a way to make the record keep playing so you didn't have to stop dancing. As always, I keep forgetting things. The reason why I got into that mind space was one day I was at George Powers' night, Crackers, and MFSB, Mysteries of the World, played. And if you know the record, just before the end, it's got a breakdown, then it comes back in, and it finishes. And I was like, there must be a way to play these two records so that doesn't happen. So the dancers, because a lot of the people at Crackers were serious dancers. And I was like, he must be able to do that. But he didn't. He wasn't a mixer. And I always thought about that. That's how I got to the Kiss thing, the Shep Pettibone thing, putting it all together, then going to the Beach and Sportswear and doing that for the very first time. But there was parts of my lexicon of mixing that was missing. My DJ partner, he became my DJ partner, DJ and radio partner, Max. He was the one who, to us, would have invented the slip cue. But of course, everybody was doing it. We just didn't know. We never saw anybody do it. We did everything ourselves. So he put a slip mat on the deck, and he said, I've worked out how to do this, or words to that effect. So, and I being the person, I don't want to get it wrong. I'm thinking, should I let the record go? He just go and just do it. And I let it go, and it was in time. And then he said, do it again. I didn't want to. And eventually, by about the fourth time I did it, I was like, this is how you do it. It's the same whether it's just literally the principle of mixing is exactly the same for no matter what record you're doing. Even if they can't mix together, you're only going to go by the bass drum or the snare drum, unless you're using a vocal. And that's when I look at, okay, I can do this. But you know what? We went into a competition, the New Music Seminar, and got absolutely trounced. We were a team, and we got trounced by Farley Jackmaster Funk. I'm sure it was him. Yeah, he was in a crew called Homix 5, and the rest of his crew didn't turn up. And he tore us to pieces because we didn't know what we were doing. The reason why we kind of had an idea of what to do, we'd listened to a tape of WizKid, and we thought he had 6 decks. So we did everything with us, but as a team, we could have done so much more. It was literally because I wasn't concentrating enough, and I missed my cue when we were actually doing the competition. So when I missed my cue, the person who was next to me doing whatever, we did it again, and then I brought my record in and we carried on and finished. But he came in, he was lightning, and he killed us. But Paul Oakenfold, if you don't know who Paul Oakenfold is one of the biggest house DJs in the world. Right? He used to work for Russell Simmons, and before he did all that, he lived in the States for a little bit. He discovered hip hop while he lived in Boston. So he came back to the UK. He bought the concept of record pools, and he started looking for people who played hip hop. Well, we were the biggest thing that played hip hop. There's other people doing it in a very small way, but we were the biggest things because we used to do the mixes for Street Sounds. And that put us in the forefront of people that everybody thought could mix. So he found us, started to service us with records, and then we found, I think it was him, Paul got us a tape of WizKid, and we were told that WizKid's coming to London and he wants to practice. So I was like, okay. So we listened to the tape and we set up 4 decks, and when he came, he started practicing only on 2 decks. And I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I could not believe how fast this guy was. And the only person I'd ever seen before that was Davey DMX. But actually that's not true. I don't know if I saw Davey DMX before or after WizKid, but I know both of them amazed me. Well, I do remember, in fact, you know what? Davey DMX would have been the person I seen first. Tell you why, because he was at Dingwalls in Camden. And I remember watching Davey DMX. He was Curtis Blow's DJ, and he jogged the record and he missed his cue. Before that, I'm thinking this is a tape because he's not making any mistakes. But eventually, when he jogged the record, he made a mistake and he just caught it back on beat and carried on. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have a heart attack. Oh my God, this guy's unbelievable. So, of course, fast forward, then WizKid comes over, we get to see all of that. And I'm like, wow, this is incredible. Once we saw WizKid, we realised, you know what, we could do this. But he was so far advanced. WizKid was very, very different to anybody else because Flash had basic scratches. Flash was very showman-y, very flashy, very, very good. But what WizKid, or Alistair as we know him, what he had that nobody else had was rhythm. He had different patterns. And also, I'm left-handed, and so is he. So I couldn't work out how, before I'd seen him, how to do anything properly. And then what he did was, if you take, you lift the record up and you watch him, he'd flick the record underneath his fingers, back and forth, and that's how he got the patterns, as well as opening the fader. Of course, now, when you're talking about turntablism, you're talking about just the most unbelievable things that people are doing. But at that point, WizKid was so far.
Go.
Yeah, the whole thing with WizKid was just unbelievable, like next level. Yeah, there was nobody like him, and we'd seen so many different people. No matter who you was watching, there was just nobody as good as him once again, because it's like the rhythmic scratches and his patterns were very, very different. It took a long time, say, for people like the Executioners to come along and change things. There were other people because, it was the DJ Supremacy belt was up for grabs at the New Music Seminar. So I can't remember all the names of the people. I remember seeing Jazzy Joyce there, Little D. I think Little D was a girl, if I remember rightly, and she was incredible. And there was Wanda D as well. So Wanda D was very dexterous. I think she had a style like Wizkid because Wizkid taught her, if I remember rightly. Yeah. So yeah, but the person who made people think about the way they were scratching and changed everything was definitely Wizkid.
Mhm. And you mentioned when you came to the States, the first radio station you heard on the Walkman was 98.7 Kiss FM. And when you went over to the back home to the UK, were you like, man, where can I get something like this? Why I get to hear this type of music all the time? But knowing that over in the UK, when you would listen to Capital One, Capital Radio, BBC One, it was more the equivalent to what would be top 40 radio here in the States. So tell me about the formation of the underground radio scene and how Kiss FM came into the play.
Okay, so let's step back to step forward. So the story of me being with Mastermind and my DJ partner was Max. One night we got back from, you know what? No, we didn't. No, one night I think we were called to a meeting in the back room where the equipment was, and we were told by the mic person, who was the spokesperson, that myself and Max were taking too many liberties, getting ourselves into clubs for free using the sound system's name because we'd had a name for ourselves in Clubland in London. But I'm thinking, you ain't paying us, so I don't see what the problem is. And I looked at him, the mic man, I was like, you know what, I'm done. It's cool, I'm out. Because I worked at the record wholesalers at the time, and I knew everybody. So it was like, it's not a problem, I'm out. I'll just go. I didn't even know what I was going to do, but I just went, I'm out. So me and Max, we left. That night, so we left that night, the Sunday night, we went to Kisses, because there was a club in London called Kisses. So the person that owns Kisses, or at least ran the night, sorry, he didn't own the place, he ran the night, because Admiral Ken actually owned it. So quick history, Admiral Ken was a owner of a club in near to the West End, and then he moved outside, and he was a reggae DJ, and he owned his own, his system was called Admiral Ken. He then moved up to Peckham, where Kisses was, which is where Gordon, the owner of Kisses, the radio station, comes from. So myself and Max, that night, that Sunday night, so we leave on the Friday from Mastermind, we go Sunday night to our regular spot to hang out, just taking some sounds at Kisses. Gordon comes to me and Max says, I'm starting a radio station, you two fancy joining? So at this point, we'd been on other stations. So Invicta was the first one in the UK that meant anything. There might have been others. I think there was Jackie as well, but the one who was the soulful one, that was Radio Invicta. That is the daddy of them all. We'd done a couple of others, and then Gordon says, I'm doing Kiss, you guys want to join? I said, well, we are not with Mastermind anymore, we just left it. Because I don't care, I only know you two, do you want to do it? So it was like, yeah, cool. And then Gordon, unbeknownst to me, he'd already sorted everything out. So the likes of Trevor Nelson, Norman J, Jazzy B from Soul to Soul, everybody, they were already in the bag. I didn't know this. So I got a contract very quickly to go and DJ in Guernsey, which is a part of the Channel Islands, which is just off of the UK. It's going towards France. And I took that contract, and I think it was for about 2 or 3 months. Max stayed back and he kept the radio show going for us. He actually went back by himself to the New Music Seminar and actually became a runner-up. He didn't win because he wasn't from the States. Everybody else, because he just wasn't known in the States, but he was good enough to get to the semi-finals. But he lost. Anyway, he came back to the UK, and he carried on the show till I got back. Then the two of us did it, and we worked together forever. Now, the thing about KISS as a pirate station, what people need to understand, so you've got different types of segregation, right? In the UK, what removed the segregation was the music, not necessarily the mindset of people, but they love the music, and the only way you're going to be authentic with it is if you are in front of black people. Now, I come from a world where most of the people I know and were playing to, were raving with, were all black, but there were clubs that were very white, and I couldn't get into. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the experience of everybody, but that was my experience. I think some of it, though, I'll say this, as I got older, I realized that a lot of times, because I went with friends, I wasn't rolling with any girls, and they prefer you to be in with a girl. And also, black guys were about dancing, we weren't about drinking. That's just not the culture we come from. So anyway, so going back to the whole segregation thing, music in those underground clubs were going from the 70s, but I was at school at that point. But when I got into the whole going to crackers thing, and I started to realize it's usually the black guys who were dominating this, and mainly white females. Now, people didn't necessarily like it, but it was who went where. If you were into girls, you congregated with who you congregated with. It was mainly black guys and white girls. That's how it was. There was, a few black females that I knew, and not too many white guys that I could even remember. It was just, yeah. The point was, musically, we were all about the music. Every single one of them was either they were a dancer, they were a really well-dressed person.
Go.
So a lot of the dress code it kind of went like this. So it's fat jumbo cords, jeans, plastic sandals, I think they're called kickers. Trying to think what else, flat caps. I wasn't like that because I came from the reggae world, so I tended to wear my Bally shoes or my Toscana shoes with fat jumbo cords. So I mixed and matched. I'd wear a trench coat and a big Gatsby looking hat, but I didn't have the sandals on, so I was wearing, like I said, two different types of clothes to one gig. Sometimes I actually would go on a Saturday night, I used to go to a place called Global Village. So I'd go from Global Village to a reggae club. So Global Village was a soul club. That was where I can't remember his name, Norman something. He used to be one of the only people I knew who played in a big club that could mix, because I only knew us to be able to mix at that point. And that's how a lot of people, once you said we were in Mastermind, people were just, oh my God, it's you guys, because they didn't know us. So you get to talk to DJs. Anyway, so clothing-wise was two different worlds for me. I'd go to a reggae club, I'd go to a soul club, or vice versa. So I'd have on enough of either style to be able to go to one or the other and not stand out without looking kind of wrong, especially when you go to a reggae club, and you've got the wrong kind of shoes on. It's not a good look, because they were just, whether it's fake hard, real hard, or whatever, and I wasn't a hard person. Everywhere I went for music. I didn't go because I was looking to prove how hard I was. I was into women and maybe a tiny little bit of drink, and definitely almost 75% music. That's what it was about. So right. The music of, in fact, how I started to understand the whole thing of sampling. So let me jump back and forth for a second. I would hear reggae records that were versions of soul records. So when I got deeply into soul, but I still listened to reggae, but I stopped collecting at that point, you would hear versions of soul records that I knew, like a Gene Khan or a Denise Williams. You know, you didn't necessarily get too many. You didn't get toasting records or MCing records in the reggae world where they covered them. They were always covering soul records. So, you know, like I said before, the likes of Delroy Wilson, the likes of Ken Booth, they would do a lot of the covers, Marcia Griffiths and so on, you know. So my world, for a long time, they still crossed one another, and then eventually I just got more and more and more into the soul thing. And then I just stopped going to soul clubs altogether. I stopped going to the soul club literally because that one night where it was on, it was like, I'm possibly going to lose my life here. I'm done with this. And I was like, yeah, this isn't it for me anymore. But the funny thing about that was Metro was on St. Luke's Road, which was one street away from All Saints Road, which All Saints Road was Frontline. But as a kid, I didn't know that. When we moved away, and I used to go back to St. Luke's Road on a Friday night to Metro Club. But the street over, which was Frontline, was crazy. Like I said, you could buy anything. And one day the police were like, we had enough. And I can't remember. I can't remember everything about it because it's so long ago. What I do remember is watching it on the news, and the police and whatever they had, the equivalent of SWAT or whatever, pulled up in a removal lorry, not a truck, a lorry, pulled out guns. In those days, you're talking in the 80s, where guns weren't really the thing in the UK, which is very different now. And they pulled out, and they literally cleaned out the whole street. That street now is gentrified as hell, dude. Very different now. If you had a house from those days, it cost you maybe 12,000. So let's say 20,000 US to have a 3-story house. Those houses now are about between 5 and 10 million pounds, you know? But that's what you get when yeah. And in that area at that time, it was definitely a lot of poorer people. So we lived there, a lot of black people lived in that area, a lot of Irish people, and I think the odd African. I mean, where I lived, where I went to I remember going to my nanny's. So the person who looked after me, and I can't remember if it was upstairs or downstairs. Madeline Bell, the singer, used to live there, which was crazy because I don't know how I knew who she was, but I'd seen her on Top of the Pops. Because if you look on YouTube, there's a song called Melting Pot. I can't remember the name of her band, but I saw her. She was a bald-headed, very pretty black lady. She was American. I think she might have gone out with Mark Bolan, if you know who Mark Bolan is from T-Rex. He died in a car crash. He died very young. But at that point, once again, I'm thinking about this when I'm talking to you, I started to pick out people at that point, at 6 or 7 years old or whatever it was, because I shouldn't even have known who she was, but I did. You know, but in terms of getting back, because I've gone all over the place, let me get back to the music and Kiss and the pirate thing. So what happened was you would have clubs who would play album cuts rather than what you're hearing on the radio. So you might hear Stevie Wonder, let's just say, to me, Stevie Wonder Do I Do is a commercial record. But I remember playing here, you know, not too long ago, maybe about 10 years ago, and I'm dancing with a friend of mine, and I said, do you know this record? She said, well, I know it's Stevie Wonder, but I've never heard it before. So that always makes me know that there's a culture outside of the culture I come from. Because to us, a pop record by Stevie Wonder is Love Light in Flight, but it's not a single. There was a 12-inch of it because of the demand, but it's not a record that you're going to play to your average person. That was my world. You know, the whole Prelude Records, West End Records, you know, all the indie stuff that came through. You know, you're listening to the Peach Boys, you're listening to, Bliss, God, I mean, to this day, one of my favourite records is Jeanette Lady Day Come Let Me Love You. And then you had the Kiss Master Mix album, which was done by Shep Pettibone, I think Tony Humphries. Those records there were just, part of my lexicon. It was just unbelievable. And we were listening to these records in the UK. And to give you context, I remember maybe about 20 years later, I was hanging out with my dude Charlie. Charlie used to be a producer. He's now in the film world. And we went to, oh God, I can't remember, is it Nels or something? That woman on the Jay-Z album, the woman who on Reasonable Doubt, the very first Jay-Z album, Reasonable Doubt, there's a woman talking about, is it Wild Out Wednesdays or something? That woman who's talking, it's her. We were at her place. So I've gone there, and I'm, as always, the only English person in this place. It's an American spot. And I got lucky that day. Leroy Burgess was performing. So he's introduced me to all his friends. And then Leroy Burgess starts going through his catalogue, the log stuff, Heartbreaker, all that. And I'm singing all the words. And they're like, how the hell do you know these records? It's like, that's what we play. They're just not as big here. They're big in a small way, up and down the country. But they're not big enough to be on the radio, or so we thought. But that's how we grew the audience. We didn't know we were growing an audience. You just played the records. There's no internet. There's no, that is in the days of posting stuff. So when you're playing a record, somebody might tape the gig and send it to somebody else, or you'll say, have you heard this record, when you're talking on the phone? And that's how you got to know about songs. You play a song down the phone to your friend. There's no cell phone in those days. You just get to know about a record from one person passing it on to the next. And so then you've got record shops further away who'd buy the records. And there's big parts of the UK that were, just as big as London. So the likes of Birmingham, the likes of Nottingham, not necessarily south, because everything was from London and then slightly north. Or in fact, so Birmingham is about an hour and 20 minutes by road. And we used to play there in different places. And it wasn't even a baptism of fire, because when somebody hired you to go to play, you already knew what you were playing. And you were a tastemaker, so they danced to what you played to them. There was no sitting people in a room saying, what do you think of this? This is what we're going to put on the radio. If they didn't like it, they'll let you know very quickly, change the record. But that hardly ever happened. We all knew the same records, we all played the same records. You just had your different style of DJing that made you unique to the person that was on before or after you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to circle back to Kiss. The one thing I found interesting with Kiss and a lot of those underground pirate stations was that they were kind of like pop-up shops where they'll be here today, maybe gone the next day, because the UK equivalent to the FCC was looking for those pirate stations to shut them down. Now, I believe, wasn't there a deal in place for Kiss to where, hey, if you guys shut down your pirate operation, there may be a chance for you to become a legal commercial station?
Yeah, that's jumping ahead. So let me give you context. So yes, we had, at the moment, it's got out of my head, but you had a company who literally went round and shut people down all the time. The thing was, we ran like and I'm talking about Kiss. We ran like as best as we could without being paid, like a real station. So the rules were, no, don't talk about drugs, no taking drugs on site. A lot of people were green smokers. I wasn't, never have been a green smoker. So you couldn't smoke in the studio, no drink in the studio, no talking, no sexism, so no talking sexism, no racism on the radio. Regardless of your views, you're there for your music, you're not there to give your views. And that's how we got more respect from the Home Office, who used to come and raid other places. In fact, they used to tell our engineer. But eventually, what we got was what they call microwave technology. So he couldn't detect us. and we would be in places for months. You know, we would set up and we would be in somewhere for months. But the only thing was, I remember we were in southeast London, and we were below a betting shop. I don't even know how we got the place, because the boss would just go, here's some keys, your show's this time, off you go. But the key would always give us problems, so you couldn't, this was one of the places where you get problems with the key. So you'd have to make sure the police weren't there when you went to go in, because they'd ask you, you know, what are you doing now this time? Because I mean, our show was like 7 o'clock on Sunday morning, I think it was, until 10 or something like that. I don't know, whatever it was. So you get your keys, you get in, you do your show. It was always a thing of, we while I was there, I think we went through 4 different locations, maybe even 5, I can't remember. But you had to make it so that it wasn't obvious. I mean, there's things that can make it obvious, like your electricity bill is going to be higher than normal, you know? People going in and out. And sometimes, especially if there's a female there and it's all guys going in, you can imagine the neighbours, what they're thinking, what the hell is going on here, you know? And I'm not exaggerating, there was one person that did happen to, and the police came and all sorts of things. I can't even remember how he got out of it, but he did. Anyway, so we were a professional setup with an illegal framework. And we just did the best we could. We became legal when we applied for, or we looked for legal status when we applied for a license, when licenses became available. So the FM band didn't have any licenses. They would only give them out, I don't know, every 4 years or whatever it was. And there was only like 3 frequencies available. When we went for the first one, we didn't get it. The second one, we did. And I remember Gordon saying to us, we had to come off here and we had to pretend to be a real station without a station. So to raise money, we would play at Dingwalls on a Saturday night. It was called First Base. Dingwalls is in Camden. And it ran for years, like without no Kiss FM on the radio. Ran for years. And eventually we came off air. We did what we needed to do and we got a license. But what Gordon said was, I know you guys are going to get offers, but if you wait around, because other pirate stations did come and say, do you want to come and join us? Because they knew what was going on. He said, if you wait around, when we become legal, you will all get a show. As time went on, yes, we got a license. We got a huge budget. But with budgets come things, you know, so there's going to be caveats in those things. And those things were, I'm giving you money, what's my ROI? Simple. So you've got people who you are now accountable to, and slowly but surely, they started to remove a lot of the people who were on pirate radio. But to be fair, the ones that got taken off were the right people, in my opinion, to lose their shows, because they were enthusiasts. They weren't going to ever be broadcasters, because it's not about how you talk and how you sound. It's the frequency, I believe, of your fluidity with how you execute your tasks. So while you're talking, can you press the buttons? Can you mix live? Not that that's, you know, you don't have to, because people pre-record all the time. But can you do the things that is required of you that somebody on Radio 1 was doing? And the answer is yes. At least I thought I could. I didn't think I had a radio voice. I just thought I was good enough to speak without messing up. You just got to remember not to swear, and remember that all sorts of people are listening. So when you're broadcasting, there's 2 things that always have to come into play. There's people that are listening to you for the first time, and there's people that have been listening to you all the time. So you have to find middle ground so you don't become condescending to your original audience, but at the same time, while welcoming the brand new people who come in. Yeah, I mean, I remember once I got out of Kiss and I went to another station. I remember the some guys came to fix the AC, and they'd never heard of Choice. And Choice was the biggest black-owned station in Europe. And they said, "Oh my God, this is great! I'm not listening to Kiss anymore. This is it." And I never thought like that. When I used to be in a car driving, I would flick for the music. I'm not listening unless it's a rap show per se, like a genre. I am going from one station to the next until I hear a song I like, and I'll stick on that until they play a song I don't like, and then I'll move over. But a lot of these younger people, it's a fashion for them. It's not fashion for me. This is my life. So when people are saying to me, "Oh no, the new thing is, yeah, I'm closing up. This brain here is closed down. I'm not interested in that." Do I like it? I don't care. There's records I still discover all the time that I've never heard that are 20 years old. I'm still playing it like it's new because I don't know it. That's how I work.
Right, right. And I want to back up really quick. Let's talk about the Brit Soul movement, how I feel for me as a music lover, when that movement hit in the US, it sprang up like gangbusters with Loose Ends, Princess, 52nd Street, Junior, Five Star, and how they were
Mm.
making noise here in America. And of course, really went into overdrive once Sade exploded, and then Soul to Soul later exploded here in the States with Keep On Moving, Back to Life. Now, did that kind of correlate to over in the UK where it's like, hey, these guys are blowing up in America. Maybe we should try to service more of the demographic over here because they're making noise in the States.
In a word, no. We knew what we knew. We didn't know what was going on in the States. When we realized it was going on in the States, it's the same records that we like. All it is they came out as on a different label. But the records that were working for us, we already knew. So, for instance, I know Junior. I know Junior. I know Junior Giscombe, right? So his phone number is in my phone. I still talk to Junior every now and again. I know Carl McIntosh. There's two different loose ends, and God, I'm sure you know about Jane's situation right now, right? Didn't know Princess. I remember going to the opening party actually of her song "I Say I'm Your Number One." Trying to think who else. Didn't know Kathy Dennis, but I know Danny D from D Mob very, very well. In fact, he's gone on with Carl from Blacksmith to be one of the biggest management companies in the music world. They work with Sam Smith. Let's see who else. Beyonce, Rihanna. Cause I'm trying to remember the name of the Stargate. That's it. They look after Stargate, or I don't know if they still are, but they were looking after Stargate. So, and Danny was somebody I used to knock around with when we was a kid, but he was somebody who understood business way more than we did, and now he lives in the States. Anyway, yeah. To answer you, as far as I could see, we wasn't about the records are blown up in the States because they're already blown up for us. What I do remember is I remember the very first time I heard Keep On Moving. I was with my girlfriend at the time. I heard the record and it was played on a rap show. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, well, that's the beat from Pickin' Boogers. And I kept on thinking, you know what, I'd love to make a record like that. Take a hip hop beat and put some strings and get someone to sing on it. But I'm like, well, how am I going to do that? Because I haven't got any money. Then I heard it and I called Jazzy and I was like, oh my God, I want one of these. He goes, well, hold on a second, let's see what's going on. And next thing you know, crazy bloke. And by the way, Jazzy's from Antigua, so he is here every now and again. Yeah. It was the same with everybody. It was like, it went through. If it worked, it worked. We wasn't looking at what was going on in the States. But we were very happy, I'll say that all of us were happy that they managed to blow up in the States.
Yeah, because when you blew up in America, when you look at music at the time, especially if you were an international act, if you can make it in the US market, then that really sets you up for success. And then to go back earlier when we were talking about Top of the Pops, and during that time period, it was hardly rare to see any black or urban representation on there because that was the equivalent to what American Bandstand was here in the States. And you could correct me if I'm wrong on this, that urban exposure to music and performance in the UK didn't really come into play until 620 Soul Train came about, where Jeffrey Daniel from Shalimar was the host, and I believe Carl McIntosh from Loose Ends was a dancer on that show. Am I correct?
That I cannot remember. And there were a couple of shows before that. There was Dance Energy with Normski as well. He was the host. Normski is from the hip hop world. He was a well known photographer, still is to this day, and he DJs as well. But yeah, I cannot remember that show. I remember Jeffrey Daniels. I remember Jeffrey Daniels seeing him dancing for the very first time. Him and I think it was a dancer back in the day called Sugar Pop. I think it was. We did. So us as Mastermind, we had the biggest soul sound system, and we played under. If you're old enough, when you tell people under the flyover, you know exactly what we're talking about. So we played. We set up right next to Labrador Grove train station, or in your case, the subway. And the crowd was just crazy. And so people would always come to check us because we were the ones known for the mixing. Anyhow, we were on the ground, and Jeffrey Daniels somehow got up on the roof of a building just to the, like literally behind us. And it was a flat roof. And him and Sugar Pop got up there, but Jeffrey Daniels was dancing. Then all of a sudden, he was doing the moonwalk, and everybody, including me, we lost our minds. Of course, because you're on the floor, you can't see his feet. All you can see is him gliding. So the illusion was 10 times better than it really was. Even now, you see people doing the moonwalk. They're still good at it because you still need that glide action. But he literally looked like somebody was pulling him on a rope or somebody was pushing him. Just crazy, and we was all losing it. Then Sugar Pop was from the West Coast, I believe. So he was a pop locker. And I think he might even have been in the film Breaking. I can't remember. But I mean, I was never a dancer. I like watching it. Even to this day, I love watching people dance, but it's just not my thing. But
Right.
yeah, I was very, very impressed.
Right. And then I believe downtown Julie Brown was a part of the Zoo dance review on Top of the Pops before she went over to the States and became a VJ on MTV, ended up hosting a Club MTV.
Yes, and R.I.P. to her. Downtown Julie Brown. It's like, I think she passed away not too long ago. Um, yeah, I don't remember her in the UK, but I remember her being on MTV. I definitely remember her because she was pretty, she was upbeat, nice, and it was unusual to see somebody who, when they opened their mouth, because she looked very American until she opened her mouth, and then you realise, oh, she's from London. She's not only a Brit, but she's got a London accent.
Right, right. And then I also want to say too how important Jive Records was to hip hop's infancy, and how Houdini had to go over to London, recorded records over there. Thomas Dolby did Mr. Magic's Wand, and also Teddy Riley ended up working with We Papa Girls, and it was some of his early production work. And then he also had another female group called Cookie Crew, I believe, and then that kind of paved the way for Moni Love and all the other later rap acts to come out of the UK. And just talk. Let's just talk about just Jive Records and how important they were to hip hop in its early years, and how they took a chance on a genre where a lot of people were like, it's a passing fad.
Yeah, well, I lived really close to Jive Records, and as the Pirate Kiss, as Pirate Kiss, me and Max were always looking for stuff before people so we could stay ahead of the game. So we were always in there. So we saw them all the time. We'd see Jeff and Will, we played pool with them. Sam Fox, who was a page three topless model at the time, he turned singer. We Papa Girl rappers. I got to interview Teddy Riley because of that when he first came over. The Houdini crew, so D, Jalil, X, we hung out because Max had a Jag, and it was unusual to have a Jag. I mean, that's a very expensive car. So we'd hang out with them, and Russell Simmons would be there as well. And yeah, we just saw all of them. So the very first British rap record that I know of was by a guy called Nutriment, which was on Jive. You know, and a lot of the people I know still to this day all worked at Jive. Jive was very, very important because they took a chance. We didn't know who Houdini was. I knew who Thomas Dolby was, because we knew about him with all the electronic equipment and stuff like that. And he was I guess, an electro pop producer stroke artist. And when you talk about all that Moni and all them, I still talk to Moni to this day. We knew everybody because that was once I moved from the soul disco era, etc. It was then into the hip hop thing. So everybody knew everybody because it was such a small scene. Mm-hmm. So every time anybody landed that came from the hip hop world, they would always get sent to us. So we would hang out. I've hung out with Mike Tyson because of Houdini, because we were in a club called Gulliver's, and we just literally hung out. He probably can't even remember. I just not too long ago interviewed Cult Jam, and I hung out with them in the same club. Everybody came through there. But Jive Records, as you pointed out, very, very important. But I don't think at the time we knew how important it was. No, I don't think. I know we didn't know how important it was. We lived that life as best as we saw it. And so I never thought that I was going to get to the level I got to. I just, because of hip hop. I'm where I am. I'm having this conversation with you because of hip hop. I never thought that it would be.
Oh.
At no point at all did we ever think, at least I didn't think that hip hop would go like this, but I didn't think it was a fad. While I was living it, I was like, you know what, this works for me. I like this. And that's where it is. And then it was like, once you started to move along the food chain in the rap world in the UK, we became the top people. And once we were the top people, and that was, once again, top people without money, we just had a name. So you then started to talk to everybody, but of course by then, we were out of Mastermind, we were on Kiss, and everybody used to check us, everybody. I remember going to see the very first Def Jam concert. It was LL, Beastie Boys, Run DMC, who's the other person? There's 4 groups, I can't remember. I think it's Houdini, yeah. And I remember LL Cool J and Booth, we didn't like I Need Love. It was like, what's this pop BS? Of course, now I realise that we were just being closed-minded. But LL will tell you, he got booed, big time. I stood there and like, I don't like this record. I didn't boo him, but I didn't like the record. Never liked it. Of course now, like I said, it's a classic. And I went to everything. We were so fanatical. Cue back in Paul Oakenfold, the now house DJ. When he was working for Russell Simmons, this is how we thought. We could get passes to go to anything up and down the country. We weren't thinking we've got to pay to drive up there because we can get in for free. We're getting for free. Well, no, we've got to pay for the gas, you idiots. But we did. We drove all around the country to see that whole Def Jam thing. In fact, it wasn't Def Jam. It was a Rush tour. Yeah, because everybody was managed by Rush. So, I got to see a lot of people in those days. I mean, I am super proud of the way hip hop has gone in terms of business. I don't always like the music, but I'm not going to curse them because when I started off, everybody was like, nah. I mean, even like, I remember Too Short is on Jive, right? Mm-hmm. And he sold 1 album in the UK. It was just, we weren't interested. Fast forward 30 years later, and the guy's back in Vogue with blow the whistle, you know,
Mm.
because rap has gone on like a 360 and it's very simplistic. So he was very simplistic back then. I was an East Coast fan, so I wanted lyrics. And I didn't realize how much of a lyric fan I was until let me join what you were saying before about the whole reggae thing and what I was saying about getting into rap. So by this time now, mid 80s, me and Max were going to a club called Bentley's. Now, Bentley's was the equivalent of, I don't know if you've ever been to the tunnel, but
Yeah, yeah,
Bentley's
yeah.
was like, so, but it played all sorts of music. But when you went to go to the bathroom, you had to have somebody watch your back so you didn't get robbed. So it's the same kind of thing. So,
Go at your own risk.
yeah, yeah. So at that point, I didn't like rap. I liked the DJ techniques because to me, a lot of the rappers were fake because I'd be on the bus and I'd see the same rappers who were talking about this, that, and the other, and they'd be on the bus, you know. So it's like, yeah, whatever. So at Bentley's one night, Derek, who was the DJ, God rest his soul, he would always play the new stuff at the beginning of the night just to get a little test to see whether or not he could elevate it to playing mid club night and then peak. And he put this record on and I heard, so clap your hands to what he's doing. Heard the beat, and then I heard so the beat was Funky President, I think slightly slowed down. Then I heard the bass line for Over Like a Fat Rat. Well, okay, and I love Over Like a Fat Rat by Fonda Ray. And then I just heard this voice. I'm like, what is this? Oh my God, this guy has just put two worlds together. He's got slow flow like a reggae MC, but he's telling a story. This is it. But you know what, Dave? Just wait and see if he makes some mistakes, because every good record makes a mistake, even if it's in the middle eight. And by the time he got to the end of the record, I was sold. I'm like, this is it. I don't know how I want to be completely involved, because we were into hip hop anyway. It just wasn't quite right. That record pushed me over the edge. So I was like, right, my position in this thing is about to come up. I don't know what it was, but it's DJing. It was natural, really, because I was the one who bought all the records and Max was an MC.
Mhm.
So that record there, Eric B for President, changed my life the day I heard it.
Yes. Can't go wrong with Arabian Rakim, the R, because for those that do or don't know, prior to Rakim, rappers were pretty much kind of almost like hollering over the records, but Rakim brought a smooth melodic flow where it was almost like jazz.
Yeah, yeah. His style was. I mean, he gives a description of it when he's saying he's trying to mimic a horn, so a sax, trumpet, whatever. I didn't see it like that. I just knew that this guy, when he spoke, he was on some next level. You know, there's
Mhm.
some people who just hit records or not, they just are the next level. You know, people like Papoose.
Right,
Especially things like Alphabetical Slaughter. You
right.
know, it was just incredible records. Big L, Biggie. You know,
Mhm. Right,
these people are just next level with their rhyming.
right,
You can't fault what they're saying they're doing, and if they get the right record, then they have hit records, or at least get a career that can keep you going. So even Moni makes records now; she still sounds great. You know, Big
right.
Daddy Kane, KRS One. I believe that if he would get into a situation where he'd have somebody produce him, I think he would still have hit records. Because
Mhm.
his thing is he got great sonics on his records, but that's all they are. They're melodically they don't work for me. They're great because it's like Nas. Nas don't always have great records. He's got great vocals, but the music a lot of places can overtake the beat. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
so.
Right, right. And the one thing that I find interesting coming from a US music lover's perspective is seeing other countries take on what's popular here in the US. Like when New Jack Swing was kicking off here in the US, you had a lot of New Jack Swing artists overseas that was adding their own elements to what was going on, like Riverman Bass, who I felt
Yeah.
should have been big here in the US. It also gave us Wayne Hector. You also had on the pop side Take That, which was inspired by New Kids on the Block,
Yeah.
E17. You
Mm.
also had Ultimate Chaos, Emanate. Shout out to my boy KG. And also, we got to thank the UK for making pop cool again in the US because the Spice Girls came over here, hit like Game Busters, and said, okay, we can make bright, fun pop again. And also, over in the UK, that was where Backstreet Boys and NSYNC ended up cutting their teeth before breaking back big stateside. And also, 3T, yes, the
Hmm.
sons of the late Tito Jackson, huge in Europe, but I felt should have translated that European success in the US. But the UK, great breeding ground for pop. Also, Five, which was to me the rare British group that if they would have had the right song here in America, would have broke because they had the look that appealed to US audiences and the sound too, because they kind of felt like a more souped up version of E17 with a little bit more R&B and rap influence.
That's a very good description. Yes, you're absolutely right. That's a very, very good description of Five. In fact, I think one of my friends was one of their. He did well. He did the drum programming. So the reason why you'll find a lot of them are like that is in the background. So Dexter was in a band. God, I can't believe it. The name escapes me at the moment, but he was in a hip hop band and he got drafted in to work with Five. So that's why their drums were like that. You will tend to find that a lot. Even now with K-pop, Teddy Riley was in the back is in the background. That's why they're doing so well, and they got that sonic. Because why would you go to anybody else? I mean, it's almost like Bruno Mars for the Asian marketplace because they all do. It's like a version of Bobby Brown or versions of Bobby Brown. And why not get the master? Because he's the one who put it together. Unless you're going to go to LA and Babyface. Yeah, it's amazing. I'm glad you're saying these things because it's just bringing back some memories for me being around some of these people. But the other part of it, you see, some of them I didn't want to know because I was like, they're just not really good versions of great groups. So in those days, you're talking about Rex and Effects, you're talking about New Edition. I mean, can you get a better record than Can You Stand the Rain? It's highly unlikely.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that? My Prerogative, you know, Poison, all that. Keith Sweat. Keith Sweat's first album was just ridiculous. As soon as I heard it, I was like, this is that next level of Soul to Soul. And there was nothing like it. It's like hearing Slick Rick. It's like hearing Rakim. When you hear like the very first Keith Sweat album, the crazy part about that was Teddy Riley had the thought to do that, and he was a rap producer. He was not interested in doing R&B, and it was Keith Sweat who convinced him. I saw it actually
Yeah.
I've been watching Teddy Riley's interviews that all the different places he's been on, and he said Keith Sweat shot dice with him and convinced him to go do this. And as they say, the rest is history. Because when you hear it, I mean, those records are hip hop records with melody on it. Because when you think about Rap's New Generation, right? Rap's New Generation, if you take, I can't remember something 2 or whatever they called that were on the record.
Classical too.
Classical 2, right? If you take Classical 2 off the record and you put Keith Sweat on it, that's literally just before the Keith Sweat album. It's the same thing. He changed the tempo a little bit, but I mean, genius, absolute genius.
Right, right. Yeah, Teddy Riley ushered in a whole new movement, and he had label heads telling producers and artists, like, hey, if you ain't got what Teddy's doing, then it ain't coming
Yeah.
out. I mean, Teddy was so white hot that Boy George had to get in the studio with him.
Yes, yeah, yeah. The one and only New Jack Swing record that he did, but yeah, it was all right. And we still like Boy George, Church of the Poison Mind, and all them. Come a Chameleon, all those
Right.
records, great records.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, there is nothing better than, well, first of all, this memory lane thing is great. So once again, I've got to thank you for asking me. But what people ain't realizing, when people are bigging up black people for doing something, Black Queen or Black King, this and that, I think people ain't recognizing black people talk like that because we were made to feel less. That's the first thing. Secondly, a lot of people cannot believe that black people invented these things because they were omitted. Even right now, people are trying to omit what was done. It wasn't because we are going back and saying we did these things. We weren't allowed to do certain things, so we had to find a way to do things. And through that, we invented things. That's it. That's how you got New Jack Swing. That's how you got hip hop. That's how you got rap, because we were excluded. And so we found a way to make our own entertainment or our own way to sort out traffic lights, a super soaker, a watch, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And then other people, because they've got more business mind or sneaky, takes the credit and the money. And then when you try to fix it and tell people the real, they don't want to hear it because you've been indoctrinated for the whole of your life and you cannot believe anything else. It's a bit like me saying, I'm a girl, but you know me to be a boy.
Right.
Because this is what you know. Why would you change it? Because this is what you feel comfortable with. It's uncomfortable for you to know that a black person was the person who invented a traffic light. Don't want to hear
Right.
it.
Yeah. So that was kind of like our way of saying we ain't gonna take no more of that. That's a Babylon reference. If you know, you know, because if you look at that movie Babylon, it came out, I believe, in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And prior to me seeing that, I was thinking, oh, what was going on in the US? I don't know if other countries are experiencing the same thing, but looking at that movie, I'm like, oh, it's the same stuff like in the US going
Yeah.
on over in the UK with race,
Yeah.
class, gender, haves and have nots. Same game, different name, different country.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we are going to have to stop this because I've got a barber's appointment. Oh, hold on. I may have this wrong. I just realised I'm thinking it was 10 o'clock, but I think I might have it wrong. It is 10:30. Let me just quickly check. Sorry, my apologies.
All right, so before we close out, I want to talk about one of my favorite singers of all time, George Michael. Faith, number one album on the R&B charts, first time that a white artist did that. And when he won the American Music Award for Best R&B Album and R&B Artist, it caused a brouhaha in the States, so much so to where he named his next album Listen Without Prejudice because of that. But prior to him breaking out as a solo artist, he was part of the group One Half Wham, who had hits such as Club Tropicana, Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, Careless Whisper, and the song that you hear every Christmas, that's a Christmas song to some, but it's actually a breakup record, Last Christmas. So let's just talk about the importance, the influence of Mr. George Michael.
Mr. George Michael, yeah. Everybody has, different listening ears. I think he was a good singer. He's not a great singer. I think if you're talking about, just let me go left of center for a second. The greatest blue-eyed singer ever is Mr. Michael McDonald. There has never been anybody better. But George Michael was a nice person. I got to hang out with him, not in a way of, hi Dave, I'm George, or no. So his cousin was my A&R man, because I don't think I said this. Me and Max made some records, and he was the A&R man at the label that we were at. I didn't know that Andros was George's cousin. He never said anything. and we stayed friends. I haven't spoken to him for years because I switched emails, and you know how it goes. But I was at an MTV awards thing because of a girl I was going out with who worked at Sony International. So went to an MTV awards night. In fact, it was the night when the Fugees did the whole thing, came on stage with the Haiti flag. That was the very first time. So I see Andrew. So I'm like, oh, what's up? So he's rolling around with George Michael and whoever else. He could come with us. So I'm just hanging around with them. That's it, literally in a crew. And that's how I got to know them. Now, the thing is, where reality kicked in for me with that was they were saying that George Michael did blah, 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 blah. I was standing right there. He didn't. And that's when I understood what the press was about, like fake news. But it wasn't called fake news, and it was called news because you believed everything that you were told. It's a bit like the New York Post, but it was something called the Sun, and they lied. And as an artist, you've got two choices. You can either ignore it or you can sue them, you know. But when you get, unless it's really, really bad, most of them, the really big artists, they just ignore them. Because I was standing, I can't remember what they said that George Michael had done, but I was out of the shot, but I was standing there. And so that was my experience of George Michael. I thought he was a great singer. He was a nice person because he could have said to Andros, well, who's this person? And blah, blah. He didn't do that. He was like, yeah, we'll roll along. Yeah.
Yeah, the Monkey remix that Jam and Lewis did for him, still funky. I wish we probably would have gotten a Teddy Riley, George Michael collab because George Michael's voice, to me, magnifique. So I know you got a heart out. We can definitely do this all day. So you got any shout outs you want to give before we conclude and talk about current projects that you got going on?
Okay, so I'm going to shout out to Antigua, because I'm here for a minute while I'm taking care of some stuff. I got to shout out my family, and I got to shout out My Soul Radio. In fact, let me start with Kiss. Because Kiss, because of Gordon, I'm still doing it to this day. So shout out to Gordon Mack. Shout out to My Soul Radio. I have a show there every single Sunday morning. It's a mixed show, 4 until 7. So 4 in the morning till 7. But it's on Mixcloud, so you can always hear it back. You know, and I've managed to get some really, really incredible interviews. Even to this day, you know, not too long ago, I interviewed Ice Cube because of that show, you know. Like I said, Cult Jam and so on and so forth. And I want to shout out to you as well, Jarrell, because you know your stuff. And this is great. When I have conversations like this, because really I'm a DJ, but talking to, it's one music nerd talking to another because it's deep. It's really, really deep. And you don't get to talk to people like that because I've never had a girlfriend, not that I want a girlfriend who's a DJ, but I've never spoken to a girl who has been my girlfriend who we get that deep. Most girls I've gone out with couldn't care less. They just want to go to a club, hear stuff, and on to the next one. So this has been great talking to you because I get to pull up memories, get to talk my ish, and get it out of my head and into the world. So thank you, and happy to do a part 2. Got to run, but I'm happy to do a part 2 of this very easily.
Yes, sir. We will definitely do a part 2, and also plug your social medias. Where can folks find you?
Okay, so on Instagram, it's DavyJ1. So it's just DAVE VJ1, or is it 81? No, it's 81 because I have 2. So yeah, DavyJ81. So you need that one. And say with Facebook, I don't even know. Facebook's a really weird one because they made us change our names and put our real names. So you have to look for Dave Morrissey, you'll find me there. And then TikTok, I have 2 accounts. So TikTok is DavyJ81 and the other one is 268 Masters of the Airwaves. So yeah, that's how you can find me.
Yes,
so,
sir.
Sorry to cut across you. So the reason why I have Masters of the Airwaves, I did a book called Masters of the Airwaves. And that Masters of the Airwaves is the research stroke history of black music. So it was done with me and a colleague of mine called Lindsay Wesker, who used to write for Black Echoes. So I was the one with the idea. He was the one with the writing experience. So he said he would help me when I asked him. And yeah, we did a really good hardcover coffee book. And we still sell a few copies every year. I'm hoping to turn it into an online book, because we don't have one, because the publisher that put it out said it was too expensive to do it for Amazon, and then I realized it was. So I've only just started to look into how do I do my own online book. So hopefully we'll get to that. Who knows, maybe even somebody who's listening might know more about it and contact me, so we'll see.
Yeah, if you're listening or watching, let's make it happen. You can catch this interview wherever you get your podcast and on the official YouTube channel, youtube.com/Beyond the Album Cover. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big thank you, a round of applause for my guy, Dave VJ. Dave, thank you very much for coming on Beyond the Album Cover. We'll definitely do a part 2 soon, and you're welcome back anytime, sir.
Thank you.